So let me take a deeper dive into our leadership competencies, and specifically we want to talk about the social emotional intelligence. Within that framework, we have 3 different levels. And so what I think of when I'm looking at these levels and where I have been in my learning is level 1 is that foundational. Am I someone that is understanding? I can articulate this purpose. I recognize my strengths. So we're really talking about the individual here. So then we move on over to level 2. Level 2 means that I have now taken and I can lead others in developing a self-awareness. I can create spaces of opportunities for learning, identifying your own emotions, examining our biases, and moving towards that growth mindset. That would be a level 2, mobilizing and power building. Level 3 is we take the work and we use the self-awareness. We use this to guide in the association's work in developing these healthy pieces. And that's what the framework is all about. And specifically, when we look at the framework of the social emotional intelligences, there are 5 competency themes. And you're going to see this throughout our presentation today. So when we look at these 3 themes, we think of ourselves as, are we at that level 1, foundational? Are we at that level 2, where we can start mobilizing and do some power building? Are we at the 3, where we're really driving the agenda? We're the ones that are moving this forward. So look at these 5 themes, and I'm going to specifically be talking about applied educational neuroscience. I'm going to talk about the 3 simple parts of the brain, and the resources that I use come from Dr. Bruce Perry, the website Conscious Discipline, and the website Revelations in Education. And the work that Dr. Bruce Perry has done, Dr. Dan Siegel, they're all saying the same thing. And so when they're all saying the same thing, to me, we can look at any of these researchers and use the information, the books, the webinars, the things that they have that help us to learn and to grow. So with these 5 themes here, we want to be able to understand our emotions, thoughts, values, and how they influence behavior across all contexts. Can we manage one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively? Do we understand the perspectives of and empathize with others? Are we able to establish, maintain healthy and supportive relationships? And then making caring and constructive choices about personal behavior, social interactions. So now I'm going to move on to the first of the researchers that I have been following, and I'm actually, I've gone back to school. So this work of Dr. Laurie, who is Dr. Laurie Desautels, and she is using the work of Dr. Bruce Perry, Dr. Stephen Porges, Dr. Dan Siegel. She's using their work and really trying to help educators in learning and growing and getting better at, now we know something different, so now we have to do better. And so I actually did a presentation to aspiring educators this summer in Chicago, and this is what I wish I would have had in my teacher prep, because I would have been able to understand things a whole lot better. So we're going to move right on and jump right in. So I'm going to start with the conscious brain state model. And this comes from the consciousdiscipline.com. And if you end up having access to these slides, you should be able to click right on that visual right there, that diagram, and it should take you to the link. So I just want to think of the 3 simple parts. We know how magnificent the brain is and how complex it is. But to help us to teach teachers and teach students, I like to start with just that very simple part of the brain, looking at those three colors, the red, the blue, and the green. So we're going to start with the survival state and what that means, the red area that is colored in red. And then the blue area is the emotional state. And then we have the green area, which is our executive functioning state. So just thinking of those three simple parts of the brain. The first part of the brain that develops as an infant, as a newborn baby, it starts developing already in the womb, is the survival state. And that really makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because as mammals, we have to have that survival instinct. And so the functions here of the survival state, the survival part of the brain, the brainstem, is that it's all about survival, the survival system, whether we're going to freeze, whether we're going to flee, or whether we are going to fight. It also has this state of arousal. In this state of arousal, you can be hyper arousal, or you can be hypo arousal. And hyper is that you're wanting to flee and to fight. And the hypo is where you are really shutting down. And shutting down, you're in that survival brain state. And so what you have here is, this is the language of feelings, of sensations. This is where the brain and the nervous system connect completely. So being in that brain state and being able to, being in the brain state and being able to take that part of the brain and to calm it down when it is in, whether it's the hypoarousal or the hyper, or you're just in that survival system. The next one is the emotional state, which that is your limbic system. And on this diagram, it's colored blue. Some other models, you can see it color-coded a little bit differently. So this is the language of emotions, of feelings. So this is your emotional tone, your emotional state. Are you motivated? What is your attention system? How's the attachment? It also controls your appetite and your sleep. This is all about making connections. Once again, there is that direct connection between the brain, and the nervous system. And so that connection is there. So if you're in an emotional state, think about maybe sometimes how you react. Does your body feel nervous? Do you feel jittery? So those are about sensations. The third brain state is your executive, and this is your prefrontal cortex. It's the cortex area, the front parts of the brain. This is where problem solving happens. This is where you are able to control your impulses. It's where your working memory is. It's where you're able to organize. You have good management, time management. You also are able to sustain your attention. This is where we want kiddos. This is where we want adults. So now I'm just going to look at all three of them because, we know our brain is so complex. I already said that. And these three absolutely work together. And you have to work through each one to get to the other. So I cannot be in my executive state until I have gone through the survival state and the emotional state. Now you're thinking, really? How does that happen? Well, without us even thinking about it, whenever we're having any kind of an interaction, any kind of something going on, the first thing that activates is the survival brain. And the survival brain says, am I safe? And so if in that snap of an instant, the survival brain is, oh, I'm safe, then guess what? Then you start making those connections in that emotional state, in the limbic system. And then once you're able to, and it happens in an instant, make those emotional connections in the limbic system, then you move to that prefrontal cortex, you move to the front lobes, and you're in the executive state where problem solving and thinking happen. So I just want to really point out how important it is to know these 3 different brain states and to know that you can get hijacked. You can get hijacked in the survival state because of things and experiences that you may or may not have had. You can get hijacked in the emotional state. So if you're not able to be doing problem solving and thinking, then you're definitely what they call dysregulated. And so this is where I'm going. This is kind of the crux of my whole portion here, is how important regulation is to that thinking, that executive state, that prefrontal cortex, how terribly, terribly important it is. So I'm first going to show you some things that you can do. And I'm also going to talk about Dr. Bruce Perry. And so here we have a quote from him in his book, What Happened to You? Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing. And it's a book by Dr. Bruce Perry himself and Oprah Winfrey. So one small little quote here: if we don't feel safe, we become dysregulated. So that's why that was so important for me to show you those 3 different brain states, because it all starts with the brain stem, and it all starts with, do I feel safe? And so Dr. Perry talks about the ACEs. And if you have not looked at the ACEs study, when it was done years ago, but also actually currently. So we have a current report, the Iowa ACEs report, that is out, that is going to be linked here at the end of our presentation, that you can look up also. And so what this book is doing and what his work is doing, he works with children, and he tells the story of the children that he has worked with. And I used to think the first time, I read his books, there's a couple of them, that, oh, do we really have kids that have gone through things like that? And I can absolutely say, yes, we have. And I met a young high school man last year that told one of those horrifying stories that wasn't too different than Dr. Bruce Perry's, one of his stories of one of the children that he had treated. And that was when it was huge for me. Yes, we do have students that have some very serious trauma that they are dealing with. So the work that Dr. Bruce Perry is doing is he's changing the narrative from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And so when that mindset shifts, that is just huge when it comes to having that trauma-informed lens, and you're using neuroscience in our education and in our teaching and in our interactions that we have with our students and even with other adults within our building. So the last part that I do want to talk to you about is Dr. Laurie. She has also several books that are out too. And this is my quote that I put out there about her work. When I was able to start understanding those connections between the brain and the nervous system, that was huge for me, using a trauma-informed lens. So when I'm working with others, that has been career-changing for me as a veteran educator. And one of those examples is exactly what I said to you about the young high school student that I was interacting with last year and the things that he was telling me. So let me tell you that there in this book, there are just a plethora, and on her website, Revelations in Education, there is a plethora of brain-aligned strategies. So I've color-coded these. The first 3 would be strategies to help someone that's in their survival brain to get out of it and then move up to that emotional. The 3 that are in blue are just 3 examples of moving out of that emotional state and getting to that executive state. And being in that executive state, you see 3 examples right there. So reach out to me if you want to know more about any of this information.